Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to bring this video to you guys today. For those of you that do know who I am, my name is Anika. Hello, hi. I'm an American living in London, and I've lived in London for the last 5 years. And in today's video, I am really excited to share with you guys my experience of living in central London for the last 5 years and share all my tips and tricks about how to move to London and also any renter advice that I can give to you guys before you move to London. So just a little bit of background before we get into today's video. I have been living in central London, so zone 1 or 2, for the last 5 years, and I have lived completely on my own. That means that I have never lived with a roommate, a partner, or a family member. So all the tips and tricks and advice I will be sharing with you guys today, it will be from a single person's point of view or someone who is living alone. Of course, you can apply these tips and tricks if you are planning on living with someone else, but my personal experience has been living alone, and I just wanted to share that with you guys today. Now, living and renting in London is not easy. I have lived in Germany for 4 years, and I obviously am from California, and I have also rented there as well. And I just have to say that the rental market in London is a totally different ballgame. So if you are moving to London, or you're thinking about it, or you possibly want to live on your own in London, please make sure to watch till the end of this video, because I will give you guys real life experience and advice on how to move to London. So before we get into today's topic about how to move to London and all my renters advice for all of you guys that are looking to move to London, I just wanted to let you guys know that I have done a number of other videos all about my experience abroad. I have done an entire playlist, which I will link up in the cards right now for you, as well as down in the description. But I've done a video all about my moving abroad checklist and also the pros and cons of living in London. So if you guys want to check that out, please do feel free to click on the card right now or down in the description. Now, before we get into the topic, I just want to say a big hello to all my new subscribers. Hello and welcome to my YouTube family. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. Now, if you've just come across this video and you're brand new, please make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on that bell notification, because I like to share all of my life advice of living in London and being an American abroad. I also do a number of videos about gardening on my balcony garden, and I share my fitness tips and tricks. So if you guys want to stick around for that, please make sure you subscribe. And if you are one of my loyal or new subscribers, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends that you might think value this video. So let's jump into the top 10 tips of moving to London and renters advice. Please make sure you stick around till the end of the video, because I will actually be sharing 2 additional tips with you. So let's jump into it today. So my first tip for you guys is to really think about where you want to live in London. London is a very big place, and there are different areas and hubs all around London. So I would say really do your research and understand exactly where you want to live in London. There's central London, there's north London, east and west and south, and there's just so many different little pockets of London that you can really fall in love with. But really try to consider your budget and your lifestyle when you are considering where you want to live in London. Now, I personally have always lived in southwest, west, or northwest London. I just prefer the west side of London, but some people really might like the east. And also, another thing to consider is your commute. It is so important to know exactly where you're going to be living and where you are going to be working and the commute time, because trust me, it can take like way too much time to commute, and so you really want to be somewhere oriented around where you are working if you are commuting. Aside from living somewhere where it is commutable to your office, also try to think of transport links. For the last 5 years in London, I have lived without a car. I have only used the train or tube or bus, and TfL is a great network and it is really well connected, but really try to consider where is it that you're living, and also what's the closest transportation link, because likely you aren't going to have a car in London, so you really need to think about where's your closest tube station or your train station or the bus station. Another thing to consider with the distance to a tube station is also a TfL card. So depending on where you live and how far outside of central London you live, it gets more and more expensive to use public transportation. So I have always lived in zone 1 or 2, so it is the smallest amount for distance traveled on the tube or on the bus or the train. So usually I pay the least when it comes to commuting. Now, it also depends on how often you commute. So if you are going back and forth from an office every single day and you are also going into London on the weekends, using a travel card is probably better for you. But again, price all those things out when you are considering moving to London, and the TfL website gives you a great breakdown of what a travel card would be. When you are considering the area you want to live in London, budget plays a huge part into this. I know, for example, in certain parts of West London, it's way more expensive than certain parts of East London, for example. It just really depends on where you're located. Like, even though Canary Wharf is in East London, it is actually way more expensive than living in North London, for example. So when you are picking out the place that you want to live, really consider your budget and your distance to work and like what you can work with and the lifestyle you're looking to achieve. So each area of London will be so different depending on rent. And what I figured out when moving here is postcode makes a big difference as to the rent price that you do pay. Aside from postcode, some other things that are gonna make a difference on how much rent you pay is gonna be how close you are to bars or shops or to the high street or to central London. All of these things add up. So if you aren't that keen of living super close to central and you want to save a bit more money, are you okay with living outside of central London, like maybe into zone 4, 5, 6, or even further? And if you're okay with that and you're okay with commuting, you're probably going to save a lot more money on rent because you are living outside of central. My last little thing I have to say about picking an area of London that you want to live in is really do your digital research. So go on Google Maps, go on to Zoopla or Rightmove and start to look at the areas that you really, really love and start to just look at them digitally. You don't have to actually visit them yet. I started looking digitally at where I wanted to be before I moved to London, and it was really clear to me that West London was more of my preferred area. So I would say just save yourself a little bit of time and make sure you're really clear on what you want from your apartment and from your flat and which area you want to be in, because it'll make the whole renting process a lot easier. And aside from digital research, it is so important to also go and visit the areas that you want to live in. I personally have always known West London before I even moved to London, and that's usually the area that I was most familiar with. So I would recommend start with the digital research, and then if you can, before you move, just have a walk around the area that you do want to live in, because remember, you are committing to this for the next year possibly, if not longer, and you want to feel comfortable. So really take the time to explore on weekday evenings, also on the weekends, because it'll give you a true tell of what that neighborhood and area of London is like. Okay guys, so my second tip to share with you is where do you actually find properties in London, and how do you even start to look for which properties are listed for rental? So personally, I have always used Zoopla or Rightmove. They're both real estate agent websites, so all of the estate agents in London list usually any properties that are listed for rent on there. Now, I know there are a lot of other options like Gumtree, or there are like Rent a Room or something, but again, I have always lived in an apartment all by myself. Aside from looking at Zoopla and Rightmove, which are great, and make sure you sign up for their mailing list, I would also recommend working with local estate agents. So each pocket of London has their own brand of estate agents that really dominate that area. There are obviously estate agents that work all of London, but let's say you are looking at West London and a particular area in West London like Chiswick or Hammersmith or Kensington. All of those areas have local estate agents that are kind of like the pros in that area, and I would sign up for their mailing list because they're going to notify you immediately when a new property comes onto the market for you to look at. Right, my third tip or piece of advice is that you will probably spend more money than you are budgeting for, and this is okay, like I know people will freak out, and I freaked out as well, but London is expensive, guys. It is one of the most expensive cities in the world, and if you want to live in London by yourself, be prepared to pay a little bit more. And that's just the reality of living in a central part of any major city in the world. Okay, so you guys probably already know this, and I'm probably repeating it, but London is expensive, not only for food, drink, bills, rent, all that kind of stuff, but the demand to do things in London is also way more expensive. So you're gonna be way more interested in going to brunch with your friends, or going to see this show with your friends, or going out after work with your colleagues. All of these things are demands on daily life that make living in London a bit more expensive. So again, just budget for more, and especially if you are living alone and not splitting bills or not splitting rent, you are gonna have to budget for more. So my fourth tip for you guys today is how to calculate rent in London. This was tricky for me as an American in London, and I don't know if any other part of the world does it like this. I know most of Europe doesn't do this like this because Germany doesn't do it like this, and neither does the US or California. So I did have to figure out how to calculate rent in London because it's a little bit different. So rent can be very confusing for a non-British person. Rent here in London and in the UK is always in weeks and not months. So usually you can see a rental for a property is 300 or 400 pounds per week. And you would think that you would normally times this times 4 and that would result in your monthly rent. That is incorrect. I made that mistake. Don't make that mistake. What you have to do is actually take that weekly rent and times it by 52, because there's 52 weeks in the year, and then divide by 12, and that'll result in your monthly rent. If you do the math of 4 times weekly rent, thinking that that is gonna be your monthly rent, it actually ends up being a little bit less, so please make sure you're doing your math correctly. So my 5th tip for you guys today is all about the deposit, and it is so important that you guys have a deposit set aside in order to rent in London. Now this is the case wherever you are in the world, but in London it's a little bit unique, especially if you are a foreigner or someone from abroad moving to the city. Now I would say you'd need to have at least 2 months of rent in your bank account to show to the estate agent that you're able to actually pay for this apartment. This is usually something that they check on with people who are foreign or who haven't been renting in the UK before, and it's just to make sure that you're able to really afford what you say you can afford. So security deposit is something that is totally different to rent, by the way. Security deposit is 5 to 6 weeks of rent, and this is something that is held separately in a separate bank account, and this is really just to make sure that, you know, if there's ever any damage or anything that happens to your apartment while you are living in it, it would cover that. So having all these things like your bank statements ready, any sort of proof of income like a pay slip, but also having your security deposit at the ready really speeds up the process. Renting in London can be really quick. Some apartments go in a few days. And I remember when I put in my rental application and I was proving to the estate agent that I was able to afford this apartment, having things like my passport, my pay slips, you know, bank statements, all of that ready to go, I was able to make my process a lot quicker. So from the second that I was able to turn in my rental application to the day that the landlord accepted, because I had all my documents ready to go, it made it really quick and easy. So I would recommend, as you are starting to look for apartments, just have a folder in your computer or somewhere digitally stored that has all the documents that needs to prove your identity, but also how much you can afford. Also, another tip about moving to the UK and renting in London for the first time is you might need to have a few additional pieces of paperwork that most British people might not need to have. And again, you are just proving that you are here to stay and you're not gonna just rent this apartment and just leave and stop paying rent. So some things that you might need as a foreigner in London is you're going to probably need some sort of reference check. So I had my employer give a reference check, but you can also have a personal reference. Maybe it's another British person that you know living in the UK. Also, another thing that you would need to have is ID check. So again, keeping digital copies of your passport, your driver's license, your work permit, any of that to prove your identity is really helpful. And one other thing that you might need is a bulk upfront rent agreement. So if you are moving for the first time, let's say you haven't even secured a job yet, you might need to actually pay maybe 3 or 6 months of rent up front. Just get all of this in writing so you are protected. But I have to say that that's only the case if you don't already have a job in the UK. When I moved to London, I already had secured a job, and my job contract along with my first month pay slip and a reference from my employer was enough for me, but I do know from other Americans that they did have to do a bulk upfront payment. If you are getting advice on how to rent in London from this video, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you know anyone else who might be moving to London or needs some tips and tricks on moving and renting in London, please make sure to share this video. My 6th tip for you guys renting in London is do a virtual viewing, especially in the time that we are in right now with the pandemic. I would just recommend to go virtually through the apartment. Now, I would say this would be such a huge time saver for you because when you go onto the estate agent's website, they usually have a 360 view of the apartment. So you're able to go through every corner of the room, look up at the ceilings, look at the floor, look at the entryway, all of the light that comes into the apartment. All of these things are things you can look at virtually nowadays, and it'll save you so much time. And if you like the virtual tour and you really think that you see yourself living in that apartment or in that flat, then go ahead and book in the actual physical viewing, but there's no need to do that for every single apartment. I made that mistake and I went and saw everything. I just saw the first picture that was listed and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the perfect apartment. And it wasted so much time because I realized like, oh my gosh, like the rooms are dark, or they're not oriented the way I like, or the bathroom is in the back of the flat and I didn't like that. So just look at all the pictures, look at a virtual viewing, and look at the floor plan and make sure you're happy with the layout of the apartment or flat before you even spend time going and viewing it in person. So my 7th tip for you guys is to ask so many questions, okay? Please, please, please ask as many questions as you want. Actually, probably ask more. So I think as someone who is new to London or who is new to renting in London, you might get a little bit scared about asking specific questions. And I would say just ask them. Ask any and every question you can, especially when you're viewing or even before a viewing. So some of the questions I would ask when I was viewing apartments is I'd be like, why are the current tenants moving? What's the closest shop? What's the closest post office? Where is the closest, bar or restaurant? What's the neighborhood like? What are the neighbors like? These are all such important questions that you should be asking either before your viewing or during your viewing. Also, don't be afraid to check things in an apartment when you are walking through it. So make sure all the doors and windows open. Also check water pressure. That's something you can't change when you go and live in a flat. So check these things out while you are viewing, not just the layout of the flat. So my 8th tip or advice is on the holding deposit. So a holding deposit was new to me as a Californian in London. And what it is it's just a small fee paid, probably a few £100s. And when you pay that to the estate agent, it is then basically guaranteeing that that estate agent is going to take that property off the market. So I would make sure that that holding deposit is refundable or is applied to your deposit, because most estate agents will then take, let's say, a few £100s to take it off the market and then start the rental agreement process. And usually they deduct that holding deposit from your overall deposit later down the line. Just a reminder, the holding deposit only takes the property off the market. It doesn't guarantee that you are going to get a rental agreement. And when you do pay that holding deposit, the only reason you wouldn't get that back or it wouldn't be applied to your overall deposit would be because you decide to pull out or you're no longer interested in that property. If for any reason the landlord isn't interested in renting that property or is no longer interested in you as a tenant, they actually have to give that holding deposit back to you. So just make sure all of that is crystal clear and that's in writing when you are putting a holding deposit in place. So my 9th tip for you guys today is all about the security deposit scheme. So when your security deposit is asked of you and you do have to give up to 6 weeks to the estate agent, make sure that your deposit is going into a DPS account. And this is a government account where the money is stored. So it doesn't go into the landlord's account. It doesn't go into the estate agent's account. It is a separate third-party account where all your money is held until the end of your tenancy. The max amount that they can take for your security deposit is 6 weeks of rent. So please make sure that you're not paying anything more than this. And also, like I said, it is a third-party account. So that means that the estate agent should give you access to this account from the day that your money is moved into this account. And also at the end of your tenancy, there should be a written agreement of anything that should be deducted from your security deposit, and then your money should be given back to you 10 days after you vacate that property. If it takes any longer than 10 days, then you should have the right to all that money. So again, just make sure it's in a third-party account, make sure everything is in writing, and you should be good to go. Cool. My last tip for you guys today is what should actually go into your tenancy agreement. So as an American, tenancy agreements here in the UK are a little bit different. So there are some important factors that you should be looking for in your tenancy agreement before you sign it. So it should have the property address, the name of everyone on the lease. So that should be your name as well as any landlord names. the start and end of the contract, also any break clauses that should be included. And a break clause is again an option to end the contract early. It should also include any landlord obligation. So for example, if the flat is not cleaned, you should ask the landlord to clean it out. My flat that I moved into right now didn't have any blinds or curtains, and I asked for the landlord to install those. So all of those agreements that you had agreed on with the estate agent should be written into your rental agreement. Also, the tenancy agreement should include everything and anything that the landlord is responsible for. So maintenance of the property. It should also include anything about DPS, so anything about your deposit scheme and the government account that it will be held in. And finally, it should also include where to pay your rent and what day it is agreed that you are paying rent. There are a number of other things that can be included in a rental agreement, but I would say those are probably my top ones that I would always look for in any rental agreement. Awesome guys, thanks for making it to this point of the video. I do have 2 extra bonus tips to share with you guys on how to save a little bit of money if you are a single person living in London. My first tip, if you are a single person and you are living in a flat all by yourself, you actually get 25% off of council tax. So council tax is something that you pay in London in order for like trash and waste and like, you know, upkeep of your general home and area, and your council looks after that. But if you are a sole occupancy, you get a sole occupancy discount. So make sure you look into that in your council's website and apply for that if you are living by yourself. And my other tip for all of you guys is to make sure you do a full inventory check and take pictures for yourself. So I will do a whole nother video on this possibly, but when you move into a property, take pictures of everything. The estate agent will take pictures, but it is so important for you to also take your own pictures, because at the end of the tenancy, some landlords are a little bit crooked here in London and they're going to ask you for your deposit even if you made absolutely no damage to the property, because they'll say you did damage at the end. So please make sure that you take all of your own pictures and store them somewhere safe so that you are able to back up that you treated the property fairly and nicely. Awesome guys, if you made it to this point of the video, welcome to London. You are now a renter in London. I am sure you guys will love it. I love London. I have loved living in London for the last 5 years. Renting can be tricky here, but don't worry, all of us are doing it and you can do it as well. So just follow all the tips and tricks and you'll get there. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. And if you did get value from this video and you want to learn more tips and tricks about living in London, please make sure to smash that subscribe button and be a part of my YouTube family. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys are having an amazing day wherever you are in the world, and I hope to catch you guys in my next video. Bye!